Hello and welcome to this special presentation brought to you by Uptime Software, Smart versus Dumb IT Monitoring, 5 Easy Steps. If you've ever wondered how to get your IT systems monitoring smarter while avoiding the common or dumb IT monitoring pitfalls that can drain resources, frustrate your IT staff, or kill IT budgets and leave your environment dangerously exposed, then you've come to the right place. Today we're going to be taking a look at the difference between smart and dumb IT systems monitoring. You're going to move up the IT maturity curve. Don't order the tool soup. Why having multiple IT monitoring tools, network, server, application, can actually hurt your staff, kill the budget, and make you less strategic. We're going to talk about the focus on time to value, how fast and cost effectively tools can provide an integrated solution to your monitoring process and pains. We're going to have some takeaways you can use, take-home specific actions to make your IT systems monitoring smarter. We're also going to take as many of your questions as we can, time permitting, so you can begin submitting those using the Q&A widget at the bottom of the viewing console. My name is Jonas Tishner. I am your host and moderator for today. And joining me is a couple of guys who are no strangers to this specific process. Phil Didaskalou is the CEO of Uptime, and we have with us as well Joel Pereira, who is the Uptime Software Solutions Architect. Gentlemen, appreciate having you both with us today. Phil, we got you?
I am here, and thank you, Jonas. And I want to start by thanking everyone who's taken the time out of their busy IT schedules to join us today. By way of introduction, I've been in the monitoring business for about 10 years, obviously here with Uptime Software, and what we do is we produce what we think is a best-in-class physical, virtual, and cloud-based management solution. But I'm actually not here today to talk to you about that. I'm here because I think you've decided to commit some time to figure out how you can improve your monitoring process. And I'm sure everybody out there is doing something today. You have some kind of processes in place. You're using some mixture of tools or maybe even single tools, and you want to improve. And, smart versus dumb is a great kind of catchy phrase, but the reality is that nobody really falls into one of those buckets. I mean, let's face it, we all want our IT ops to run smoother. We want better response times, and we want happier users. So what I'm going to share with you today is some knowledge that I've acquired that I hope is going to be valuable that I can pass on to you and that you can take as a takeaway to start thinking about your own environment and how you can make it smarter. It's really based on the fact that I've spent time with hundreds and hundreds of companies of all shapes and sizes, all industries using a variety of technologies over the last 10 years. So I hope you're going to find it interesting, and as Jonas said, please do ask questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So in embarking on preparing for today, I had to sit down and think about what is smart monitoring, and I didn't just pluck this out of my head. Again, it's based on all my experiences that I've seen in live environments. And I want to share those, but I thought I'd approach it from a question point of view. So I'm going to present you with a list of questions here that maybe you can ask yourself as I go through them. And what I'm going to talk about, the 5 steps or the 5 key things you can do, are really based on these sort of soul-searching types of questions in the context of your environment. So the first one, think about your environment and ask yourself, does the monitoring solution that you have in place really watch over your entire IT infrastructure and all the services that you're running, including end users' ability to access them? So when I say entire, that's really the key word, because what we've seen is that a lot of organizations don't do it in its entirety, and we'll talk about why that is the case in a few minutes. Second question is, can your systems and services, your core infrastructure, auto-recover after an outage? Questions like, can they restart themselves? Systems that go offline, if your email stops, can it do anything to auto-recover after an outage? And if it can't, well, why is that? Third question, can your infrastructure go a step further and actually self-heal itself during periods where performance is degrading, where maybe people can't log into applications as quickly or emails not arriving as fast? And as a whole, as an example, can it auto-provision additional capacity to solve those performance problems? Now, this is pretty advanced type of capability, but we're going to be talking about that again here today. Fourth question is, are your monitoring tools or tool set, is it topology aware? Does it understand the difference between a system sitting out there on a network or whether it's sitting behind 3 layers of routing in remote regions? If it doesn't, what you probably experience is what a lot of companies unfortunately come across, and that's just a sea of red alerts. And can you actually auto-escalate alerts to the right people at the right time? Now, that implies more than just technology. It actually implies, do you have a documented process for who should get notified when? So we're going to tackle that question as well here today. The 5th point or question is, can you measure the availability of all your key business services? And when I say business service, we're talking about everything that you deliver to internal end users and to your external customers. So, for example, if you're a web retailer and you sell product online, are you really measuring the end user experience and what your customers are experiencing? And can you report any of those kinds of metrics to your customers or business units? This is a really key high-value thing to do. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing it or thinking about doing it, but again, I'm going to discuss that as well here today. 6, do you have monitoring tool soup, or as Jonas said, don't order the tool soup? And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the problems that you can run into when you operate with too many tools. But the real question is, do you have a unified dashboard where you can take the output of all those tools and see the correlation between everything in your environment? And if you don't, maybe start asking yourself, why not? And finally, one of the important topics I want to talk about is kind of an equation I came up with that I'm going to show you guys later, and it kind of defines what I call the total cost of monitoring. Now this may have been defined by some analysts in different ways. I don't know. I just kind of assembled this out of my own experience. And what the total cost of monitoring is everything that you think is obvious, including license fees and annual support, plus some other things you may have not thought about. So in a nutshell, tracking what you're spending on monitoring over time is really, really, really important, especially when you look at improvements that may require additional justification to spend more. And your CFO, your CIO are probably going to want that kind of justification. So again, as a takeaway, if you tuned out at this point, you didn't hear anything else, go away and start thinking about these questions, because the answers to these questions will lead you to the opportunity to make improvements. So when it comes to monitoring infrastructure, these are really key things. So let's start. Before I actually get into what the 5 steps are, let's first take kind of a quick look at what is the evolution of monitoring for most companies in terms of their technology and the process internally. In other words, what stages do people go through? So we're just going to look at some of our interesting characters here popping up on the screen. I'm just going to wait for them to show up. Really kind of the way man evolved, if you believe in Darwinian theory, is a very similar analogy to the monitoring of technology infrastructure. On the left end of the spectrum, we have our caveman who, well, unfortunately, he has no monitoring tools, and he must live a very chaotic life. And there are very few organizations in this category, but the truth is there are some. I did come across an actual state Federal Reserve Bank, believe it or not, 2.5 years ago that was in this state. And when I asked the system administrator what he actually does to monitor his environment, he just said literally he has to walk down his rack and look for red lights. And all of you can certainly appreciate how frustrating an experience that must be. On the other hand, I can't understand why they just don't print more money, but maybe that's a different conversation. Next to that is, or what happens gradually is as people move from no monitoring, and this is where a lot of people live, is in the reactive state. And this is where you're monitoring. You are pulling basic server, system, and application metrics, but you're maybe doing it in a way that isn't conducive to triaging problems quickly, or maybe your times to resolution are still really long. And you're still having problems, and there's lots of finger pointing going on in the environment. The network admin says, hey, it's not a network bandwidth problem. It must be a server problem, and there's lots of that going on, and perhaps some of you experience that from time to time. But really where you want to get to, and I will kind of add an error here that says most enterprises as a base are kind of stuck here, and I would actually say maybe a little bit between reactive and the proactive state. So the proactive state is where you have made the transition where you're not only monitoring infrastructure, but you have defined the business services. You've probably set up the base for SLAs, and you're monitoring those. So you're being proactive, which means you're not waiting for users to call the help desk to let you know that you have a problem. If you're truly being proactive, you know it's happening before your end users do, and that's kind of a key accomplishment. It's a milestone in your evolution. Moving beyond that, and this is kind of getting to the utopian state that I would say a very minority of organizations are getting to, not because the technology is not there, because it also does involve some other higher level of maturity in terms of IT process, which is what people do on a day-to-day basis. But outage avoidance is clearly an opportunity area for everyone that monitors infrastructure, because this is a case where you've empowered yourself with a technology that can not only sense when conditions are degrading, but can then auto-assign resources to fix them. So this is kind of where the future and where we're all trying to get to when it comes to IT monitoring. And some people are doing it. And some of the things I'm going to point out today are that the technologies are in place to do this. So let's kind of take, I think this would be a good time, Jonas, for us to take a quick poll. I'd really be curious to see, and this is blind, folks, so no one's going to know how you answer this, but honestly think about where you are in your environment and see if you can help us out. Let's do a quick poll.
Yeah, I just want to say, looking at this chart, I think Darwin would be proud, sir. Charles Darwin would be proud. Okay, so here's the poll. Where, and it's pretty simple. Where would you rate your IT department? Based on that evolutionary scale, are you a caveman with no monitoring? Is your IT department reactive? The basic metrics being monitored, is it proactive, monitoring business services, or outage avoidance, capacity planning, SLA management, et cetera? And I would ask, just based on your knowledge, Phil, where do you think most people probably sit in this?
Good question. A very small minority are in the caveman category. I mean, if it was anything, more than maybe 10%, I'd be disappointed. I would say about probably 5%. I think the bulk, and I would say about 80% live in the reactive to proactive categories. A bit more heavy on the reactive. I would say probably about 50%, maybe 30% proactive, and maybe only about 10% or so are actually have achieved outage avoidance on a very consistent basis.
Okay, we're going to give them a couple more seconds here. We have some people who are still answering, asking for a little bit more time.
Sure.
Based on your experience, do people, are they actively searching for ways they can move up the scale? I mean, is that the idea, is to find where you're at and then to figure out how to get to that full outage avoidance stage? Absolutely.
And another point I would make is there's probably nobody sitting out there that hasn't already thought of the fact that they need to move in this direction. Usually some of the challenges are basic things like funding for the technology and the equipment, staffing and resources, because it does require some thinking and planning around it. But in some cases, there is an element that's missing, and that's just the knowledge of, at a more detailed level, how do I do it? What should I monitor? How do we set up our SLAs? And the good news is there's lots of great consultancies and advisors out there that can help you with that kind of planning. So everyone believes it. It's kind of like when you go to your doctor and he tells you, hey, are you working out at least 3 times a week? And we all say yes, regardless of how much we work out, because we all know we should. It's simply a matter of making the commitment to get there.
So you look at the results, it looks like the majority of our viewers, 55%, are in that reactive mode. And you kind of already spoke to that.
Yeah, kind of, and thank you everybody for being candid and submitting your answers. I would say there's some really good news here. And if you're in the caveman category, the good news is you're going to see the most quick improvement. It's like when you first go on a diet, it's those first few pounds are the easiest to lose. So that's really good. Very consistent, yeah, and I would say 50% approximately do believe they are in very much a consistently reactive state. The proactive, that's fantastic. Guys, pat yourself on the back because you're already well on your way to outage avoidance. And for those that are there at outage avoidance, I'd love to chat with you to learn how you did it. So That's fantastic because, and again, it's not an absolute state. You may be avoiding maybe a certain percentage of your outages, but if you have technology that are doing these things, you're well ahead of the curve. So that's great. Thank you, everyone. This actually really helps make these kinds of presentations even better, and I'll kind of gear what I'm going to talk about based on that. Oh, sorry, folks. I just jumped ahead one slide too far. Okay, so now before I get into how to do it, what the key steps are, let's kind of take a minute here and talk about why we want to do this. So, I think everyone probably understands why because they know it's well, but, let's remind ourselves, the people that live without monitoring or just slow break-fix monitoring, they really are always in a heart attack zone. And what that means is that they're on a weekend and they get called by their VP and they said, hey, everything's down, drop what you're doing, come in. And nobody likes living in that kind of a state. No one wants to get calls at 2 a.m. By break fix, it's a constant grind. And there's two problems with that. One is a lot of service desk tickets, and believe it or not, one shocking statistics I've heard, about 60% of service desk tickets never get resolved. I actually was astonished when I heard that, but that's come through studies from Gartner and Forrester, and that is shocking. What that means is that the problems were never triaged to the absolute reason for the degradation. So, living in that zone, it literally is work hell. So the problems, customers get degraded service, and the employees themselves get demoralized. I mean, nobody wants to be doing a constant break-fix job when they have higher skill sets. There's more interesting projects to work on than doing something as mundane as monitoring and figuring out, why problems happen. So if we look at our other little character in the upper right-hand corner, now this guy, he's living in the promotion bonus zone because the fact that he's deployed outage avoidance and taken advantage of a lot of the new technologies that have come out in the last few years, he's reacting far less than anyone else is. In fact, he's so smart, he's probably monitoring while he's just sitting there in his pool, and if his BlackBerry goes off, he may take a look at it. So wouldn't we all like to live in that zone? But this is the level of IT maturity that organizations we've seen progress in. I've seen Fortune 100 companies that have spent a lot of money that still never get there because they don't do things the right way, or they're understaffed, or they're under-resourced. And these things are real challenges. But the good news is the technology's gotten a lot simpler, a lot easier, and a lot of it is self-deployable. So as much as you're probably sitting there thinking, hey, Phil, well, that's great. I know all this stuff. I haven't got the time or the money. If you commit a bit more time, and we can help you with that, as can some other companies like ourselves, we can get you there a lot easier than you think. So let's move on here. So let's go to kind of the first step. And please don't jump all over me and tell me that this is obvious, because when I say monitor everything all the time, I'm really not being facetious. I can't understand that. Well, I can understand, but I've been into so many organizations where they monitor about 85% of what they have. And, those couple of SANs that are sitting there, or a couple of those Windows servers running Hyper-V or VMware servers where they're kind of not really tied in because, we didn't have enough licenses from our vendor because our budget ran out, or the guy that knew anything about those is gone, and I sure as heck haven't had the time to learn anything about them. So what we see in most cases is people aren't monitoring everything, or maybe they're just monitoring all their platforms. And by the way, what you want to look for in a tool is cross-platform server monitoring. So make sure that, whether you have one tool set or whether you have lots of tools, make sure you're covering off all your platforms, because when you have a problem and you have to go back in time to figure out why it happened, there's no point in having an incomplete set of data. It's very much like why when you go for a doctor's checkup, he checks a lot of your vital signs. If you just went in and he didn't check some of them, you could catch a disease, and that would lead to a painful future. So monitor all your hardware platforms. Above that, make sure you have a tool set that can actually probe into, I would call, all your services and infrastructure software. So all your web servers, your databases, your network infrastructure. Ideally, what you're looking for here is something that can cover all the stacks, whether it's storage, network, and combine and aggregate all that data into one database. So this is one of the problems that arise with tool soup is that you can say, well, yeah, we got tools that cover all this, but can you normalize all that data and report on it from one unified place? Can you correlate problems that are happening? Can you triage to figure out? And usually the answer with tool soup is no. So really key here is try and gravitate towards building a tool set that lets you get everything that you need. So when I say monitor here, and again, every organization is different, there's some key things you want to do. As a best practice, what I've seen is you want to be taking at least 5-minute interval samples when you're data collecting. And that's just the rule of thumb. You want to collect at least a couple years of historical data for business reasons when you're doing capacity planning, when you're knowing how much you want to spend based on how much capacity you used last year. You're going to have some actual data to do that, as opposed to trying to justify why you need so much equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Now that said, I've oversimplified this. If you're a web portal retailer, you want to be monitoring the end user experience or maybe logging into your applications a lot more frequently than that. If you're a bank and you're a teller, 5-minute monitoring won't do. So it's a generalization, but the concept is simple. But it's amazing. It's just like exercise. We all know we should, but we often don't for some reason. And I'm going to talk more about some of the things you can do to help you make sure that you're doing these things. Above that, you want to make sure you get a tool set that you can easily produce reports. And what do you mean are reports that you can give to management, things like availability, things like what are your mean time to resolution or MTTR. You don't want to be computing that yourself. You know, I come across some customers like a large telco where they had a poor guy that had to spend a week a month doing nothing but taking data out of 5 disparate tools and then trying to aggregate them into a spreadsheet and then report those to 3 different business unit owners. I mean, what kind of a job is that? You know, here's a university-educated guy with lots of experience ready to slit his wrists every time that week of the month comes along. So no point in doing that. There's tools out there that can give you that information. So that really is step 1. I'm going to come back to this because there's a lot of things tied into this. I know that some people are sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, I already know that, but I don't have any money. Well, you know what? There's ways you can do that without going out and buying lots of other tools. If you are looking at replacing tools, there's certain key things you want to look for. Let me just point out a couple before I leave this step. When you're looking at monitoring tools, you know, a lot has changed in the last 12 years. You know, 12 years ago, you know, you had a choice of freeware tools that some of them weren't very good or they were very light on their data collection, and then you had very expensive framework software. And when I say the big 4 frameworks, you probably know some of these big name vendors that I'm talking about that sell very robust tools. They're kind of like the equivalent of running an MRI scan. But the reality is no one can do an MRI every 5 minutes. It really doesn't make sense. So what's happened in the last few years is companies have come along, one of those being ourselves, Uptime Software, that have figured out you don't have to develop very heavy software in order to get deep metrics. For example, you want deep metrics coming out of your software. You want deep metrics coming out of your platforms, but you want light monitoring. And what I mean is you don't want to tax the systems heavily that you're monitoring. So you don't want big monster monolithic agents, oh, what a word, you know, draining your systems. And some of those big framework products do that. So the good news is you can monitor everything all the time. One of the biggest objections I came across a lot of organizations are, yeah, we don't monitor because those agents, they kill our servers and we don't trust them, so we're going to just shut them off. And then you're back to, you know, monitoring a fraction of your environment. So try and get away from that. Monitor everything all the time, 7/24. Step 2. So now we're kind of jumping into the future for, you know, I guess for some of you based on, you know, what we saw in the survey results. But think of it as kind of a goal. I mean, you have to have goals when you're looking at improving your IT operation. And let's talk about step 2. So step 2 is setting yourself on the path towards automated recovery, self-healing, and capacity provisioning. Look, with the advent of virtualization and cloud, these things are possible. They're a lot harder years ago, but now you can do it. You don't have to break the bank. You don't have to spend $1 million to do this. So the first message is here, automate everything. Automate everything that is automatable, for lack of a better word, because the goal here is to work as little as possible. And I'm not being facetious here. You want to be this guy in the pool. But more specifically, I'm not suggesting you're going to have to spend less than 8 hours at work, but you're going to spend a lot more time working on high-value projects that are interesting as opposed to running around break-fixing things. That's boring. That's mundane. That's high stress. That ruins your life. So really, you want to work as little as possible. Why do something that can be automated? And it's possible. So, first step would be to automate the server recovery. This can be done through tools like ours and others where you can sense, is the system alive, is it not? Let's recover it, let's reboot it. Depending on the OS environment, there's different ways that you can recover data, information, and get apps up and running. Even if you were to do this manually, you're still going to end up doing the same thing. You're going to restart the server. Why not automate it? Automatic application and service restarts. We have so many customers that use our technology, but as I said, there's other tools out there that can help you restart apps, sense when they haven't responded, when they should, and restart them. And I assume a lot of you are already doing this today. The advanced auto outage avoidance kind of activity is when you can really start having your monitoring not only sense when things are going awry or stopping and starting, but actually starting to cause performance degradation. If you're starting to run out of CPU and you're running a mail campaign that drives customers into your business, you want your monitoring system to go out, auto-provision, and assign more. And I'm sure all of you are using virtualization to some degree. With tools like ours tied into some of these new virtualization platforms, it is completely possible to have your monitoring solution act like the brain and then go out and actually make these adjustments in real time. So this is really cool, and this is going to save you lots of stress, and it's going to allow you to flourish when it comes to delivering services. So unfortunately today we don't have enough time to cover all the methodology, but we're happy to get into this more detail with you in terms of the hows of doing this. But the key message is, the goal is, get there. The technology is available, it's easy to deploy, and it's more affordable than it's ever been. I like this last point. I didn't actually invent this, but I was following a triathlon runner just the other day, and he looked pretty hardcore. And right on the back of his T-shirt it said, look, you can have results or excuses, but not both. And I think that's true in life about everything, including IT ops and getting where you want to be. Step 3. So we're kind of now delving back into alerting, because alerting and escalation now ties not so much into, it's not so much a technology thing. This is more of a process understanding. In order to get smarter at your monitoring, you also want to get smarter about how you alert things, how you alert people, and and what you do about it. I've seen alerting fail for a number of different reasons, but let's kind of start at the beginning. Implement notification and escalation based on how you operate. If you have no idea, if you have no process today, and everyone in your company gets alerted every time something goes down, I'm sure they're pretty frustrated. And there's lots of methodologies you can get, whether it's ITIL or some basic guidelines. We're happy to help steer you in that direction if you have no concept of even how to set up monitoring. But I'm sure most of you do, and you know how you want to be notified and who. So make sure the tool set allows you to define that. Don't buy a tool or don't deploy a tool that limits you. If it doesn't operate the way you do or won't allow you to, get rid of it. Ensure your tool set allows you to define multi-level auto escalation that is time-based. So what time-based means is if people don't respond in a certain way, make sure you can get it to the next person for example, in a service desk scenario who need to see the alert. Make sure it's response-based, which means if certain people are responding to an alert, don't continue to send out to everybody else until they've had a chance to respond. Make sure you can respond or send to alerts by role. So if a problem is related to a database, your Oracle database has gone down and your monitoring system is intelligent to know that, don't send that off to the guy that manages storage yet, because you probably don't need to tap him on the shoulder yet. So you need that kind of flexibility. Make sure you can do it or set up your alerting by region or by any other custom grouping that you need. So I'm just saying this because I have seen a lot of other tools that kind of miss one or two of these things, and these are all key things you want to consider. because all this really leads you to the next point. You want to notify the right people at the right time. For those of you that have experienced Seas of Red, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't, it's a nightmare. Something goes wrong, and your monitoring tool that maybe was good once, maybe it's a freeware tool that doesn't have some of these capabilities above, it alerts everyone all the time. Or maybe you've spent the money to buy a tool, but it doesn't work well, and it wakes up everyone, and nothing will lead to IT frustration or frustration of your users by sending every alert to everyone. I mean, you want to get out of that. That's chaos. One of the other things, and this is kind of a best practice, a few years ago, I was actually, as a consultant, involved in a disaster recovery project. I was working with an organization that actually spent millions of dollars on disaster recovery, and they spent all this money, bought all this technology, process in place, and it failed when the time came. It was like D-Day, and no one could contact anyone because people's emails and numbers changed. So whatever you do, make sure you test and validate the notification process at least once a quarter. It doesn't take you very long, but you want to go through and make sure that you're contacting the right people and that they're contactable. So produce reports and save historical data. This is really key because when you want to go back in time and find out and do some intelligent planning, you want historical data. Seen again, lots of tools out there, but they limit you. After 30 days, or our database isn't big enough. No. Keep 2 years of historical data. Make sure that you can retain not only performance specs, but all your outages and all your mean time to repairs, because sometimes you're doing a really good job and no one knows about it. Let's move on to step 4 here. Again, we're talking here about concepts, but concepts are important. So report business metrics to your customers. Why? Well, the first reason, and this can be a selfish one, it's about career longevity. If you don't, you might get outsourced. Whether or not you realize it, there are companies calling your CIO every day saying they can outsource IT and they can outsource reporting because they do all these wonderful things. And trust me, they are showing them graphs and charts and pretty pictures that they love to see. So think about starting to produce some of those things with the tools that you have, because you don't want to be part of that statistic. And show them really how good you are. You're doing a good job a lot of times. Make sure that your customers and your management understand how good you actually are at it. So what should you monitor? I would start personally with those services, whether they're internal, that are the most critical, or that bring dollars into your business. So if you do sell things online, monitor those web servers and produce stats that can show when you're not doing well, when you're doing really well. Transparency is something you cannot avoid. And in fact, it's going to allow you to flourish in your career. Trust me about that. I've seen more people move in the ranks and have a lot more joy in their careers because they understand the importance of showing, not hiding what they're doing. So how do you do this? Make sure you buy a tool that allows you to produce that. So when it gathers all the metrics, it can auto-push that out into a self-service portal. So you literally give the people links to where their stats are, and it's all transparent. If you can't do that with your tool set, think about building one or buy another tool set, because this is really, really critical. So this is the topic of a whole other presentation that we may be doing in the future, but those are the key points about really reporting things out to your customers. So step 5, I would be remiss if I did not talk about money, because it's one of everyone's favorite topics. So the first thing you want to do is really track how much you're spending. So total cost of monitoring in order to manage your return on investment is key. Otherwise, you have no idea if you're overspending. First thing you should do as part of this process is eliminate tool soup. Seriously, guys, stop the insanity. If you have more than 3 or 4 monitoring tools, you probably have way too many. And the reality is you can get it down to 1. Uptime Software does it. A lot of other vendors do this today, and it's very possible. This will save you time, it will save you money, and it'll make you a lot happier in your career, and your customers will love you for it. No one wants to go around managing tons of tools. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. If you're using a Big 4 framework, a lot of you, I don't want to name them, but a lot of you know who these guys are. Very expensive monitoring. If you're using their tool sets, you are literally spending 400 to 500% more than you have to. It's not a typo. I'm serious. If you're doing it, stop doing it. Don't rip out what you have necessarily. See what you can build on top of it. You don't need to buy all these modules from these Big 4 vendors. There's cheaper ways to do it. If you're spending $1 million on monitoring, I guarantee you're spending too much. If you're spending $100,000, you probably spend a lot less. make sure you track this figure of what you're spending quarterly, annually, and over 3 years. But I want to talk about what this figure is. See, most people, when they think about cost, they think about, oh, okay, it's my software license fees, my annual support, and I'm done. Well, no, it's a bit more than that. And for those that have used the Big Four, well, no, actually I spent just as much on professional services as I did on the software. For those of you that didn't, maybe you didn't, but PS is a real part of deploying a solution. Not ours, by the way. We're very proud of that. But, yeah, you can spend money on setup, customization, and tuning. You can spend money on training. Talk about those Big Four solutions. Again, you need to be a rocket scientist in some case to use them, and I don't know that many rocket scientists out there. So that's kind of money that you can save. Here's the big elusive one that, and we're going to take a quick poll after this that hardly anyone tracks. What is my internal cost to manage my management system? How much money do I pay one or two guys that do nothing but monitor the monitoring system? I will tell you, I'm not trying to put anybody out of a job here. We're simply trying to take those valuable resources and get them doing something far more valuable for the IT operation, like architecture, like meeting with their customers and designing better apps than sitting there managing a monitoring station. I've seen people, I met a bank that had 600 servers. They were using Nagios. By the way, I'm not slamming Nagios. It's a great tool. But they literally had 2.5 man people, or the equivalent of 2.5 people, full-time managing the management system because they wanted new features. They have to build it themselves. So, and the CIO said, well, yeah, it's free. And I go, well, not really. At $80,000 a head for fully loaded costs, they were actually spending almost $180,000 to $190,000 a year. If it works for you, great, do it. But realize that you are really spending money after you buy your monitoring tool. So I can send you guys some more info on this. It's a really key metric. Please think about starting to track it, especially if you're going to compare new tools. Like if you say, you're right, Phil, I got to go out and get something lighter like yours or like some of the other people in your space. We actually do have an evaluation, a vendor checklist on our site, but this is one of the key components we're going to integrate into it because it can really help you compare how much time do I have to spend to manage my management system. But I don't want to leave this. I want to take a quick poll. Jonas, maybe you can help me with this. I want to find out how many people actually track their TCM and whether they're doing it this way. So maybe I'll turn it over to you for a quick minute.
Yeah, perfect. The question to our audience, do you know your total cost of monitoring? And there's 3 selections here. No, this is not something we track today. Somewhat, I know the basic cost in terms of licenses and maintenance. And yes, we track the total cost trend of our monitoring, tools, consulting, support, add-on, staff, time, et cetera. So, Phil, again, just want to get your thoughts here as we're waiting for the totality of our viewers to submit their answers. Where do you think most people are going to fall here?
Into the somewhat. In fact, what most people do, it's kind of what the traditional model is. You track what you spend in terms of license and annual support. So the majority seem to fall into the somewhat category. A very small number actually track the total cost, including their internal manpower.
What's the reason for that? Why do you think it's so low?
Yeah, I think for a number of reasons it can be sort of abstract. Some people are sensitive about it. That they love the tool they put in place. They're committed to it. They work with their vendor, but they spend lots and lots of time managing it and patching it. And so sometimes it's a fear of like, oh, if I say that, if there's better ways to do it so I don't have to spend money on this, then I'm going to be out of a job. But the reality is they're just tying themselves to a low value job. So it's one of those things that management would love to know that can help the organization move forward. Or they simply haven't thought about it. Or, it could be that nobody tracks what they spend their time on. But again, as a best-in-class organization, what we've seen is companies are starting to really do this. Frankly, nobody really wants to sit there babysitting a monitoring tool. You should be able to set it up and check in on it once in a while. I would say if anyone is spending more than a day a week on their managing the monitoring system, they can make massive improvements. So I'd be curious here to see what the results are.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it looks like they are pretty much split here. Let me push these out. 48.2% is no, and 48.2% is somewhat. So yeah, you were right on the money there.
Well, folks, thanks again for your candor. If you're in the no category, I do understand, and I kind of feel for you, but you might want to start considering it, because as you think about wanting to improve your operation, you're going to have to somehow justify it. The good news is, if you haven't tracked it, well, you may be able to go and ask for as much as you want, because there's no historical data. But I would seriously start tracking it. It's not very complicated. You could set up a quick spreadsheet. It's not a lot of work, and we're happy to assist you with that. Not surprising, again, most do it the traditional way, which is license and maintenance. Very few people track their time on it. A lot of cases is simply because management hasn't thought about it, so they're not going to bother their staff that are already busy saying, hey, I want to know what you're spending your time on. But guys, if you are spending a lot of time, and I'm kind of directing this to the people that manage the management tools, and you don't want to be doing anymore, start tracking it, because you don't have to. Those big four solutions require full-time people. Freeware tools are great, but it's kind of like going to the supermarket. You got to shop, you got to cook yourself. Maybe you can buy the odd meal out. Sometimes it's a lot cheaper. So eating out has gotten cheaper, and a lot of people do it too these days. And that's kind of the equivalent of going out and buying a monitoring tool. So thank you for that. At this point, we've kind of summarized, again, the 5 key concepts. And again, forgive me for not giving you a product presentation, but I don't think that's why you're here today. I'm hoping that you're going to take away some of these points and really help you improve. Before I do that, though, I have Joel Pereira here, who's one of our very smart systems architects. He's not going to, again, talk about uptime specifically, but on the topic of how to get to nirvana, which is outage avoidance. Joel, can you give us some more insights into how to get there?
Perfect. That's perfect, Phil. Thank you very much for that awesome intro, and for the awesome information that we actually got today in this very helpful webinar. So Phil went over the really important 5 steps. I'm going to try to summarize that into an even smaller collection of things here. So if we go back to the evolution stage, ignoring the caveman, zero monitoring, we have the reactive, proactive, and of course our goal, which is the proactive outage avoidance, right? That's what we want to get to. So how can we actually get there? Well, a couple of things. We do need to identify the leading indicators, so the really important metrics that are going to show, these are the things that we see before our applications crash, before that web server dies, before my e-commerce site goes completely offline. Those are the super important things we need to find out. If we don't know them now, that's exactly what we need to figure out, right? We need really intelligent, really deep root cause analysis engines, things that can help us find those, and then something that can monitor them, right? And it's we don't necessarily need to get down to every single little metric. Keep in mind that with all these applications and technologies out there, there are billions and even trillions of metrics that we can collect, but we don't necessarily need to, right? So it's important to keep that in mind, right? We need to track all that, because really at the end of the day, why do we need to do this? Well, of course, we want to get that promotion. We want to get the bonuses, but there's a process to get there, right? We can't just jump to that step. We need to, first of all, get our bosses happy, but we can't just get them happy by doing nothing. We actually need to get our end users happy, right? We need to make sure that these applications, that these business services are up and running. All right, so how do we do that? Of course, we know what our goal is. We know why we want to get there. How do we get there? Well, I'd like to think that there's 3 really main things that we need, really. All right, so it all stems from, as I click next here, something that we desperately need, which is a complete IT dashboard, a single unifying tool that monitors everything that makes up my business services, right? And of course, you guys know what your own business services are. It all depends on, really what your business comes up with, right? So it can be anything from email. Email's got to be up and running. It could be a website. It could be some service. It's basically any service that your users require. And of course, there's technologies and applications and servers underneath all that. And right now, you may or may not have tools for each individual layer. You may have a network tool. You may have tools monitoring your servers. But if they're all separate, right, tools monitoring applications, but if they're all separate, you're never going to get to that unifying field of view and up to the heaven of server monitoring, which is unified, right? So you need to have a complete IT dashboard that gets all of this. One tool that monitors all the different layers and gives you an aggregated view of your entire topology right there. All right. And of course, I may be biased, but of course, Uptime does this for you guys as well. But I'm not going to talk about that too much right now. Okay, so this is first level. If you want to switch to going from caveman to being more reactive, you need dashboards. You need to be reactive. You need to see the red lights instead of having to walk into the server room to see them. You should be getting proactive alerts right away. So once we get intelligent dashboards, things that notify us of any little outage, now we're at the reactive stage. What's next? Well, we want to become more proactive. So we need some reports that help us manage our capacity, right? So now we're talking about capacity management, especially with all the virtualization technologies. Now we're talking, from there we're talking about sprawl, which is, we can have an entire conversation just on those two topics. But if your monitoring solution isn't unified, well, it probably won't help you solve those two problems, never mind everything else, right? So capacity, we need to make sure that we're managing the disks. We need to make sure that we're ordering them in before we run out of disk space, right? If I run out of disk space today, chances are I'm not going to have a disk on hand, or I may not. So it's going to take time for that application to go back up. That's a lot of wasted money. We can't have that. So we need proactive tools to help us get to this, to the reporting stage. So really we need proactive reporting. All right, so that's level 2, being proactive. But of course I said we want to get to the end goal, which is proactive outage avoidance. Well, for that we need to be able to actually report on our MTTR, our mean time to recovery. And guys, this is not an imaginary number. This is an actual measurable and deliverable number and report that exists. Again, I'm slightly biased, but there's a screenshot there that actually shows my mean time to recovery. So literally how long it's taking my IT department to fix issues over the last 5 months. Can you guys get that right now in an automated report? I can right there, right? That's what management wants to see. And even better, if you can get a nice little quadrant like this. This is a incident priority quadrant. And really the end goal of that magic quadrant, I don't know if you guys can read that, but the legend there on the left says downtime in minutes, and at the bottom it's number of outages, right? So you can see our end goal is to get down to that little bottom left. If you're all the way over there, all those little check boxes or all those little blue squares are servers and applications, right? So immediately you can see you want to get down to that little happy quadrant, the bottom left one. If you have everything down there, that means you guys you're doing an awesome job. You have low number of outages, low amount of minutes of downtime. That's awesome. Luckily, because we're in IT, we're always going to have outages, and thank God for job security on that. So we need tools like this that can help us bring up the outliers, right? The problem children, the ones that are always down, or the ones that have systemic outages, right? So anything in the top right quadrant, that's the quadrant of death. Those are the ones that have they're down all the time, and they have a ton of outages. I can be sure that my end users are going to be complaining about that the most. Those are the ones we need to target, because week over week, month over month, I can be generating this report, sending it on up to my boss, and he can see, actually if he doesn't see, I'll be sure to bring it up to his attention, that, you know what, that business service that was up there in the worst quadrant, well, this week it's actually down in the happy quadrant. So we've resolved issues, we have a lot less problems, and things are running a lot smoother. Right? That's what we need to get. This is not imaginary, folks. This is a real report that can be generated, whenever we like. Right? So this is some of the stuff that we need to become more proactive. Not just proactive, but actually avoiding outages altogether. All right? So that's where I wanted to end off here with you guys. I just want to actually touch on one final thing. If you guys are interested in getting more information specifically about Uptime, our tool here, feel free to contact us if you guys have any questions or specific requirements. Feel free to contact us, email. You can pick up a phone call, or just go on our website, because it has a ton of information. And likewise, you have free downloads. If you guys are interested in just downloading, of course, go to our website, download it for free. You have a free 30-day trial. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. All right. I think it's time for a Q&A session. Jonas,
Q&A.
are you?
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, Joel, and thank you for that. First question, I guess we'll stick with you here, because it's specifically asking about the trial and proof of concept, which they're saying sounds interesting. How long does it take to set up the software?
Sure, I can answer that. So for our software specifically, to set it up, I mean, you can download and install it in about 5 minutes. I've actually done it. We have videos online actually showing it if you don't believe us. But adding your infrastructure, feel free. It takes all about 15 to 30 minutes. You'll have real stats and information on your live infrastructure.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Phil.
Sorry, I was just going to add into that. Depending, of course, on the size of your environment, I can give you just a customer recently that was talking to an insurance firm. They rolled out a full proof of concept, not just installing basic monitoring, which Uptime does, as Joel says, in a matter of minutes, but they literally deployed to 500 servers in a day, and they were running with health checks. So after 24 hours, they were in full data collection mode, which, by comparison, you don't need consultants to show up to set these kinds of things up. So very easy to deploy.
Okay, good. And, I'll kind of toss these out, and you guys can figure out who's going to answer them. But this next one's coming from Kim. How does the automatic spin up, down of additional resource services or servers work? Are we able to get 100% visibility of that?
Yeah, definitely. I can help answer that. So this is Joel again. So there's different technologies out there that we can interface with. For us specifically, if anyone's ever heard of VMware and specifically one of their tools, Orchestrator, we actually have a really tight integration with Orchestrator. So not only can we detect outages not just happening at the physical layer, but also at the virtual layer, as well as the application layer. For example, let's just take Apache, a web server. If we have way too many clients hitting our website on a specific day, instead of just alerting, we can just trigger a workflow action via Orchestrator, spin up a new VM, get a clone, or even two if we want, for the extra load during heavy peaks of the day. And then later on, we can bring those back down.
Great. Next is a question from Alex. How do I track service levels on my production applications?
Sure, I can help answer that one again. So for service levels, now we're talking about SLAs again, obviously. So for SLAs, actually before we just jump into SLAs, we need to understand what an SLA is, and that's really an agreement that we make with our end users where we state, we're going to give them a certain amount of proper availability and performance. So SLAs in general are really a way of converting what the business needs are to actual measurable deliverables. So understanding that, once we understand what the end users actually need, they need their apps up and running, what does that actually mean, up and running, right? Is it server availability? Is it making sure that the website is up and running? Is it making sure that email is not only up and running but also responsive quickly enough? Once we understand all that, we understand what the important metrics are, we can feed that into the system, monitor all the components, and get that into proper SLAs in the product.
Joel, good feedback, and this is Phil. In addition to that, we have extensive reporting in our tool on SLAs that allow you to see, are you within compliance, or are you outside of compliance, and everything, including all the other reporting that we do, can be pushed out to a portal. So you can send out to your business unit or the app owners so they can see exactly within your compliance tolerance or not. Again, this is kind of like a consulting-free approach, really easy and quick to set up.
Phil, let's stay with you for a second. This next question is in regards to your caveman anecdotal bit. The question is it possible to move from caveman to incident avoidance quickly, or is this more of a long-term play?
It is possible. I would say you can go from caveman to proactive, and then with a little bit of planning and work, you can get to outage avoidance. That's going to largely depend on what tool set you have and what you want to use. I am proud to say that with Uptime, we've seen people take that jump and go from nothing to completely proactive in literally a matter of days. So, yeah, it is definitely possible. And, again, whether you choose us or whether there's a few others out there that I would say can do that, not many, but that is possible. So the difference between going from proactive to outage avoidance is just some additional implementation that you need to do. Joel alluded to it. That's setting up or integrating. It's kind of like hooking up your brain to your hands. Uptime's the brain, and once you can hook it up to a nice pair of hands, and there's a few options there, you can get the outage avoidance done for you.
Great. Next question. I have an IT environment with multiple platforms and vendors, including AIX, Windows, and VMware. How would this work with an IT dashboard?
Good question. There's a few angles on that. Well, first you want to make sure that your monitoring solution can certainly cover those platforms. Uptime software absolutely can. In terms of a dashboard, what you can do, for example, is one of the key things you want to track, I would guess, would be capacity. So system resources. So what you can do with a dashboard like ours, for example, is you might have a few hundred AIX, Windows, Linux, VMware, whatever you have out there. You can actually see combined aggregate usage across your enterprise. So you could look at a dial, for example, and say, well, in the last 24 hours, I've ranged between an average of 40 to 60% consumption across all my data centers. Or you might want to say, well, I just want to drill down to our New York data center or to our London data center. And really a good dashboarding kind of system should give you the ability to, with one or two clicks, see an aggregate of all your capacity across the enterprise, and then with a few clicks allow you to drill down, right down to groups, regions, and individual machines. So certainly that's one kind of ability. The other side that you can look at is availability, which is what about all the applications and business services running across all my platforms? I mean, especially with virtualization. I mean, you don't know where it's running at the time. It could be vMotioning across all over the place. But tools like ours can actually track that. So at a dashboard level, you would see all your availability, all your response times. But if you really want to see where things are, you can go in and produce reports, for example, with VMware that can show you where all your LPARs are, where all your VMware instances have been moved around to. If you run into a problem, you want to do that kind of forensic analysis.
Perfect. Well, guys, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. Certainly want to thank my guest today, Phil Didaskalou, the CEO of Uptime Software, and Solutions Architect Joel Pereira. Guys, certainly thank you for being with us and providing a lot of great information today.
It was an absolute pleasure. And to everyone else out there, thank you again for your time. You're already on the right path, because if you're asking questions on how you can be smarter, you're certainly going to get there. And if we can help you, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, and both of your email addresses, for better or for worse, are up there right now. If you'd like to hear more from Phil or Joel, or you want to give them some feedback, there you go. Very few will throw their actual emails up there like that. Nice job, guys. If you've missed any portion of today's webcast, or you'd like to watch it again or share it with colleagues, I want to remind you it will be available in its entirety on demand for everyone at Uptime Software. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.